a lot of people feel like it took too long to get this thing going, and that this episode's ending is the acknowledgement that there is only war. We're finally at that point. When a lot of people criticized it for, I thought that's where we would hit at the end of season 1 already. So, what do you guys have to say about that?
I mean, I disagree. I think I like the idea that there's a lot of time and attention that is devoted to the setup of the war, things that happen before the war begins. I like learning more about the characters and what they're willing to do to either accelerate the war or what their plans are for when it happens or to delay it as much as possible. I don't need action scenes and battles and fights to be interested in a show. In fact, oftentimes they're way worse than what we would have gotten otherwise. So I understand why people feel it's slow, but I don't mind
I
slower.
I was or am of the position that the validity of the dithering entirely depends on how they do justice to the presence of dragons in the war, which I think episode 4 does a pretty good job at like doing justice to the idea that these factions are very reticent to actually commit to this fight because they have an inkling of what it's going to entail, and what it's going to entail is pure ruin.
Yeah, throughout this show, I've never gotten the sense from any scenes that, I was never thinking, oh, we're wasting time here. Like there's some flaws in the decision making when it comes to the writing, but it all, I think, is very carefully considered. And I am interested in pretty much the entire cast, so I don't mind that everybody gets a little bit of time, and if significant plot beats come when they will, and that's fine. I'm not waiting for anything in particular to happen. I'm not going, oh, where's the next dragon fight, like whatever. When it comes along organically, that's cool.
Yeah, I don't feel like time's being wasted. We're not just
Yeah.
doing nothing. Something's always happening. I'm always interested to learn about the characters, what they do, where pieces are being moved, what people are planning, and how they're doing those plans. Uh, I'm okay with it. I don't mind it at all. I think it's a good show overall, for the most part. Without even, you don't have to have violence and open warfare to have a good, compelling TV show.
Well, the argument that would be made,
Yeah.
especially as of episode 4, is what makes the violence and the battles so effective is all of the prep work that they do in the form of scenes and stuff. I would consider the show a very
Here's
high
organizing.
grade of time well spent as opposed to wasted. We've highlighted ourselves. There's some scenes, maybe certain characters that we believe needs work, lines of dialogue that don't fit as well as we'd like, or something like that. But I mean, as TV shows go, this is up there. It's not. Um, we're dealing. I hate to bring it up, but it was an easy comparison because of the releases, right? But like comparing it to Acolyte, where it's just like Acolyte is barely a fucking TV show. This is like actually properly a TV show that you can have very long discussions about, breaking down everything that's happening. Big ensemble cast, a wide array of events and things to care about beyond just one idea or something that they're not even nailing properly. But, and gradually trying to include these parts of the conversation as we go, House of Dragons faced a shit ton of criticism for being much lamer than people were hoping it would be. Not episode 4, though, which is where we're heading next.
Mm.
And, I hope for the sake of the show, especially with the quality we've gotten, that it isn't seen as, like, shit, ultimately, because it didn't have enough fight scenes or whatever, which I feel is maligned.
Yeah.
Or malformed, sorry, as a perspective to have on it. It's especially if we've got 4 seasons in total. I don't want to be, the comparison is often made to the late stage Game of Thrones, where as seasons were releasing, even before they came out, some people would be like, "Oh, this season will have this battle, and they're going to build up to this battle,"
Yeah.
which was very much culturally speaking huge, but substantively speaking, not very valuable in retrospect, because most people call the end of Game of Thrones at around season 5, ultimately.
I think they'll consider for episode 3, though, considering the power of dragons and this being a civil war between a family, it's interesting to see the Cold War lead up to the war getting hot, because it is the kind of thing that's like, hey, do we really want to do this? Because we're talking about annihilating each other, essentially. And yeah, and then episode 4 is we see the result.
I think so. And so, let us discuss episode 4 then, I suppose.
All right, let's do it.
It opens with Damon having a little vision once again in the throne room in King's Landing, the Iron Throne main room itself. And he's seeing young Rhaenyra again, who says, "You created me, Damon. You're now set on destroying me, all because your brother loved me more than you." And he chops off her head after she says that. Which, yeah, you know.
That really pissed him off.
Yes.
He was big mad.
I don't even know where to begin exactly with this. You could, again, talk about it forever. The nature that we know everything we know from season 1 about Damon kind of toying in his role with the family, the power they had, and figuring out exactly what he wanted. He knew he was the heir, and so he got to kind of exercise his power in whatever way he wanted. My take on season 1 is still that Otto moved him around to prove to Viserys that he is not suitable in court, that he shouldn't be in power, that Damon is a monster, and that would support the argument that he shouldn't be heir, right? Like, we get the impression that Otto's whole goal in season 1 was to prove that someone else should take the spot, that Damon couldn't be the ruler, he was going to destroy the realm. And so in each of these roles, proved to be bloodthirsty, aggressive, and selfish. And meanwhile, you know, his influence on his family was quite destructive and chaotic, and I don't know that he cared that much until his time in season 2, we're having to face a lot of repercussions of the things that he's done, said, and how he's ended up where he is. A lot of it came from Rhaenyra herself in episode 2, but now in these visions, facing it directly, he had a lot of influence on Rhaenyra when she was much younger, and he kind of helped craft her into the position she was in. It's his actions that forced her into a role of being the heir. He even felt that way when he was speaking to her, but of course he had that insane point of view that it was because Viserys feared him. But I think he's coming to terms with a lot more of it now. And again, just, I really like these scenes because it makes me think about all of this stuff.
Some of my favorites, yeah. These flashbacks and, well, not flashbacks, but his dreams.
And
what more interesting thing could you do with a character like Damon, who's so much of him is about his image, than go into his head and explore the psychology behind it and how he actually is processing things?
Yeah, make him face all that stuff.
Then when he wakes up, they have him with the camera angles reflecting his blood on his hand, and then when it turns around, it's gone, sort of thing.
That was really good.
That was really cool.
Harrenhal is spooky.
And Simon keeps appearing at the post of his dreams, right? Waking him up or being involved at the edge of them. I wonder if there's something to that, or if it's just coincidentally the person who is trying to wake him up, you know, because he's got information or whatever. Doesn't have to mean anything more than that, but it might do. You know, the curiosity is whether or not Simon is in on this. I think a lot of people's perspective is he obviously must be, but a lot of other people would say, well, he's just doing his job. And that's what this would be.
Yeah, and he shows up intermittently, yeah.
Which to me is...
Every time he shows up, it's like, yeah, he's here to do something.
To me is evidence of how this... it could be either, because they've set it up very well. It's very clean. And, of course, it takes a while for Damon to even acknowledge that something weird is happening, you know? These are just strange dreams. He doesn't need to talk to anybody about them. Or are they? But in any case, yes, his news is that the Kristen Cole is taking castles, and they're aligning with Aegon underneath it, right? Like, the way it works, obviously, is you take a castle and you say, like, hey, surrender, fight in our army, and you'll be spared. So, just standard stuff, but still bad news for Team Rhaenyra, including, of course, Mr. Damon at Harrenhal. And he's organized for, I forget his name. It's because you got Grover Tully as the Riverlord, and his son's son is who Damon's going to be meeting, because
Oscar.
Yeah, Oscar, because his
They're
father
both
died.
Sesame Street characters.
Grover and Oscar, yeah. It would be cowardly of them to not include Elmo, but you know what? It's fine if that's how it has to go. Fine.
Maybe that's the father's name. I guess they don't mention that. That's probably something people know, but
yeah. So yes, he is the heir, and he's gonna, like, Simon is set up for Damon to speak with him, and this would be another example of the actor doing such a great job. If you keep an eye on Simon in the scene, he looks very uncomfortable because he clearly cares a lot about Oscar. and we find out that he raised him. And so obviously introducing Damon Targaryen to him is a bit of a worry, and Damon obviously treats him very rudely, for lack of a better word, because he doesn't give a fuck about him other than what he can do for him. And so, yeah, Simon just looks stressed out in this scene. And I like the touches of, he can't quite, he sits down awkwardly, the sword is in his way. Oscar, he's holding himself very sort of nervously in front of Damon as he would be, but it's interesting because he holds a significant amount of power. He's going to be the one that can decide exactly what the Rivermen are going to be doing if Grover Tully dies. So... which comes up in this conversation. Damon basically says, do you mind putting a pillow on your grandfather so that we can speed this along?
Yeah.
Which is just, yeah.
But
I would never.
Well, it cuts over to Simon, who's essentially face palming. He's just like, Jesus Christ. Because, again, I think he's a lot smarter than he lets on. There's nothing he could do here about, in terms of like saying that's rude or that's inappropriate, whatever. Damon has full control over Harrenhal to the point where he's kind of dangerous. I assume he has a reputation throughout the kingdom. It's not something Simon's
Damon,
not gonna be aware of.
absolutely, yeah.
They got to be kind of careful with him. But yeah, he basically says your house is kind of useless right now, and instead he's going to go for the Brackens or Blackwoods, whichever one fights for Team Black, which is like that shows how much Damon even gives a fuck about any of this. And he says, yeah, just summon them. Yeah, and you get a little moment of Simon trying to reassure Oscar. I'm genuinely curious because obviously, like I said, we're recording this at the time there's 2 episodes to come out for the season. I don't know how things will conclude with Harrenhal. I'll be interested to see it, though.
I don't think they're gonna conclude the Harrenhal stuff this season. I think that'll probably be season 3 stuff mostly. But I mean, also I don't want to give anything away really.
Well, the way seasons work, right? You tend to tell a story. It doesn't necessarily mean there won't be any more scenes in Harrenhal, but there will be. There's no way they're not going to make some kind of conclusive point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some kind of closure for sure.